10 years old when we joined the lower group, the youngsters. Then you got higher up and higher up and higher up. So anyway, you have to educate, and you have to educate the children. It was getting so bad about the education of children, they would even turn in their parents. But on the other hand, in my family, my father was the oldest, and so he took mostly care of, first, let me explain the family that you get to know. My mother, that was my Oma, lived with us. My father's mother lived with her daughter. So anyway, but she was, and there was another, he had a younger brother, and apparently he joined the party. But my father was absolutely against Hitler, even before he took over. He had such a strong personality, my dad, that I can remember way back. I was born in 1927, and Hitler came in 1932, but in power in 1933. So you can imagine I was very young. And I remember my father, I'm not going to join, etc., etc. But that was almost a death sentence if he didn't join. But when we had dinner, breakfast, and so on, we were not allowed. We had a promise that we're not giving any information, that we're not talking about anything that was talked about at the table. It started with my father's business. He was a tax advisor, and my mother worked with him. So taxes is something very private. Income, what people, how much money they made, and how much taxes they paid compared to the income. So, from little on, my father and I knew, you don't open your mouth. So to keep the mouth shut about Hitler came easy, because we knew what would happen. I'm a little behind. So anyway, now we're going about Hitler. It took me a long time, and I'm still not quite the way, how can people follow something like that? And how can people endure and let it happen, like the concentration camp? Well, now let's go back to Hitler. It was after the Second World War. There was a depression. You know what a depression is? Where you don't have the income, where you can't, money isn't worth anything. One day it was 10,000 marks. The next day the 10,000 marks were only 2,000 marks. That's called a depression. So when Hitler came, very sneakingly, and he promised, hi. That is a conversation anybody can hear.
No, we're shutting the door.
I'm telling her about, so anyway. So when Hitler came and promised, oh, I make Germany big again, you can work and make sure that you have enough to work, and food will be on the table. He could mesmerize the people with his meine deutschen Volksgenossen, ich verspreche, I promise. And he had a voice that you listened to. And finally the times were so bad that anything and anybody could convince the people, oh, you're going to make it good, etc. Well, so came the votes. The only thing about all the voting, it came out around different ways. One would tell one would trust the other to tell something that was going on, etc. Because you didn't want to get caught talking bad about Hitler and so on. Well, it came out that Hitler did not have all the votes that he needed. He just made them up. And nobody dared to say anything. Well, that's not true either. I wouldn't know about it if people wouldn't have talked about it. So anyway, what he did in the beginning was like he built beautiful streets and he just made life a little easier. Except there were a lot of punishments. It was good and bad, and it turned out it was more bad than good. Fear. Why don't you ask me a question? That would be much easier.
Ask her the questions.
But let me go about fear. Fear is something very terrible. When you have to be afraid to say something because your life is in danger. Unfortunately or fortunately, to me, in hindsight, it took a lot of courage, but I didn't realize when I was going up. I talked openly against Hitler, and that was my downfall. 1 year I went into a different change after 4 years in school. You can choose for higher education, but it's a little harder to do than but anyway. I made a terrible mistake of talking openly about against Hitler. The first thing I said is, well, there was war. I said, mothers in Germany, our mothers, have tears in their eyes and sorrow when their child has to go into war and you never know if it's coming back or not. Well, in an essay, I wrote, not only the German mothers have the fear and the sorrow, but our enemies' mothers are feeling the same pain as we do. Whoa! That was the wrong thing to say. That's when it really started for me in school. And I have no idea why. I was never really popular, and especially I lost all my friends. They were afraid. The parents told her, you cannot associate with her because she's against Hitler, and then you would be involved. Now the funny part, ironic part, I belonged to a group of 10 girls, and we were, how it happened, we don't know, I never know. But you had to belong to a group, it's called Hitler's Youth. But I belonged to a group of 10 girls whose parents were the same thoughts as my parents, all against Hitler. So one day, what we did, we were singing in hospitals to the wounded soldiers, and we're singing to a wedding. Everything was just singing. So one day we were told we should come to the hotel, the big hotel in Heidelberg. We have to sing. Okay, nothing. All we never wore uniform. And all we wore was a navy blue skirt and a white blouse. Now, the uniform would have been more to it, and we didn't. All right, we're standing in line, nice little group. We're going to do what we're going to sing. The door opens, and who walks out? Hitler. Now, you have to realize, it's impossible to realize that the 10 girls that we are, and one boy, we were, if there would have been one word coming out that we're absolutely, and the parents absolutely against Hitler, he wouldn't have survived. So, when I came home, I thought, oh my God, I hope they don't print it in the paper. I hope they don't write about it. The next morning, I opened the paper, the front page, Hitler shaking my hand. And very, very important, that he shook my hand. You couldn't see that, but I knew. I thought, oh my God, what is my papa going to say when I hope it isn't in the paper. Next morning, he opens the paper at breakfast. And I thought, oh my God, now I can hear the thunder. He said to me, Ruth, did you wash your hands right away after you? I said, and shook his hand. I said, Papa, first of all, he shook my hand. I made absolutely sure of that. And secondly, that was the first stop I did. I washed and washed my hands. Good girl. So anyway, the danger of that was unbelievable. Now, you brought up something with the paper.
She has questions she wants to ask you.
Okay.
I think she answered almost about all of them.
Well, just answer.
I just have like 2 more left to ask her. She answered almost all of them.
Okay, go ahead.
Like, did you meet Hitler on the streets? She shaked
No.
Hitler's hand.
No.
You shook his hand.
You shook his hand at the hospital, but you didn't meet him on the streets.
I did not shake his hands. Okay, I'll show you. Give me your,
Okay,
put
Mom.
your hands out. I'm shaking your hand, okay?
He shaked your hand.
I was standing in the line, and he put his hand up because neither one of us did. He had to shake our hand. Since he likes to shake hands, he didn't think anything about it.
Okay. So can I ask you like a couple more questions? Sure. Okay, so the first question I want to ask you is, what experience did you have with Nazis?
With what?
With Nazis.
Well, I didn't have any experience except that you have to be very careful what you're saying. And I was always very careful. Now, I lived in the city, so there were a lot of houses, one next to the others, apartment houses. But across the street from where we lived was a Nazi headquarters. A Hitler, I don't like the name Nazi, a Hitler headquarters. So we had to be very careful what we were saying, where we were going. Now, there was a grocery store across the street. And they always created Heil Hitler when you walked in. My father always said he couldn't talk. I said when I went there, I said the same thing. Hello, how are you? But there were a lot in back of us was somebody who was a big Hitler member. And he gave, we were never safe.
Okay.
Except we had some.
You only have a few minutes between each question.
Okay.
Okay, so did you ever have to see videos